Catch him! He took my wallet, Grandpa screamed across the lobby. The stranger froze, and my family instantly slipped into their practiced victim roles. I intended to stay silent until the guard whispered that I needed to see the footage in slow motion. As the screen rewound, I saw a hand sliding into Grandpa's pocket that did not belong to the stranger. The sickest part was that I recognized those fingers immediately. My name is Violet Jenkins. I am 34 years old, and my life in Cleveland is constructed around the specific, architectural discipline of perception, as the brand strategy lead for Marrow and Pine Solutions, a boutique firm that handles crisis management and identity for mid-sized corporations. My job is to control the narrative. I take messy, chaotic realities and package them into digestible, clean stories that the public can swallow without choking. I know how to spot a lie. I know how to spot a deflection. And most importantly, I know exactly what it looks like when someone is trying to sell you something you should not be buying. So, when I stood in the lobby of the Hallowcrest Hotel in Cincinnati, watching my family implode in high definition, I was not just a terrified granddaughter, I was a professional watching a poorly executed campaign launch. We were there for the 80th birthday of my grandfather, Frank Whitaker. The Hallowcrest was his choice. It was one of those historic, heavy-stoned institutions where the air conditioning always smells slightly like old money and lavender polish. The lobby was a cavern of gold leaf and mahogany, echoing with the polite murmur of guests and the soft, non-invasive improvisation of a live jazz trio tucked into the corner. It was the kind of place where people spoke in hushed tones and wore blazers to breakfast. It was the perfect stage for the Whitaker Family Theater. I had driven down from Cleveland that morning, taking a half-day off from my hybrid schedule to ensure I arrived before the chaos truly settled in. I had spent the 3-hour drive on Interstate 71 listening to podcasts about corporate ethics, trying to steel myself for a weekend of passive-aggressive comments about my career, my lack of a husband, and my refusal to move back to Cincinnati. I thought I was prepared. I thought I had my armor on. But you can never really prepare for Frank Whitaker. The incident did not build up slowly. There was no rising action. It was a cold open, violent and abrupt. We were gathered near the concierge desk. My mother, Diane, was fussing over the arrangement of the welcome bags for the out-of-town relatives. My brother, Grant, was checking his reflection in the brass frame of a luggage cart, adjusting the collar of his polo shirt. He looked every bit the Golden Sun handsome, broad-shouldered, with that easy, terrifying confidence that comes from never having been told no in a meaningful way. And Grandpa Frank was at the counter, leaning heavily on his cane, arguing about something trivial regarding the room key or the view. Then, the air in the lobby shattered. "Catch him!" He took my wallet. Frank's voice was a ragged tear in the elegant atmosphere. He slammed his hand onto the marble countertop, the sound cracking like a gunshot. He spun around. His face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson and pointed a shaking, liver-spotted finger toward the elevators. That man. He took it. The jazz trio actually stopped playing. The hum of conversation died instantly. Every head in the lobby turned to follow the line of Frank's finger. The accusation landed on a man standing about 15 feet away. He had just stepped out of the elevator bank and was walking toward the exit. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal wool coat that fit him impeccably, and he was holding a structured paper shopping bag with a boutique logo on the side. He looked like a man who had perhaps come down for a coffee or a meeting. He did not look like a pickpocket, but the Whitaker machine did not care about optics. It cared about momentum. "Don't let him run," Grant shouted. My brother moved with a speed that felt rehearsed. He didn't just step forward. He lunged, performing the role of the protective grandson for an audience he knew was watching. He cut across the path of the stranger, blocking his exit with his chest puffed out. It was a physical intimidation tactic masked as heroism. He spoke loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "Stop right there. Pal, you aren't going anywhere." The stranger, who I would later learn was named Jordan Hale, stopped dead. He didn't flinch. He didn't drop his bag and run. He just froze, his eyes widening slightly, not in guilt, but in the sheer, bewildered processing of sudden aggression. "Excuse me," Jordan said. His voice was calm, a baritone rumble that cut through the hysteria. "My father's wallet." My mother, Diane, shrieked. She had abandoned the welcome bags and rushed to Frank's side, clutching his arm. "He just had it. We were targeted. I knew it. I told you. Frank, people watch for us." I stood frozen near a potted fern, clutching my own purse, feeling a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. It was happening again, the immediate polarization, the instant casting of roles. In my mother's mind, we were the Kennedys, constantly under siege by the jealous masses. In Grant's mind, he was the protagonist in an action movie, and Grandpa Frank. He was the untouchable patriarch whose word was law. If Frank said the man was a thief, then the man was a thief. Facts were secondary to Frank's feelings. "I haven't taken anything," Jordan said, taking a measured step back as Grant crowded his personal space. Jordan held his hands up, palms open, the shopping bag dangling non-threateningly from his left wrist. "I walked out of that elevator 10 seconds ago." "Liar," Frank bellowed, shaking off my mother's arm. "You bumped me, right there by the pillar. I felt you dip into my pocket." "I have not been near the pillar, sir," Jordan replied. He was looking around now, scanning the faces of the crowd, looking for a witness, for sanity. His eyes landed on me for a fleeting second. I saw confusion there, and a spark of indignance, but no panic. A thief panics. A thief looks for the exit. Jordan Hale was looking for logic. 2 uniformed security officers materialized from the edges of the lobby, their radios crackling. They moved toward the commotion, their faces tight. This was the Hallowcrest. They did not do public disturbances. "Gentlemen, please," the lead officer said, stepping between Grant and Jordan. "Let's lower the volume." "He stole from my grandfather," Grant said, pointing a finger in Jordan's face. "I want him searched, right now. Empty his pockets." "Sir, please step back," the officer told Grant. Though his tone was deferential, he turned to Jordan. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to accompany us to the side, just to clear this up. I'm not going anywhere until you explain why I'm being accosted," Jordan said, his posture straightening. He looked like someone who knew his rights. "I have been a guest here for 2 nights. I just bought a tie. I haven't touched anyone." "Just empty your pockets if you're innocent," Diane yelled from the counter. She was whipping the crowd into a frenzy. I could see people whispering, nodding. The narrative was taking hold. Old man robbed, well-dressed thug, heroic family. It was a simple story. It was an easy story. And I knew, with a sinking certainty in my gut, that it was a lie. I had been standing 10 feet behind Frank when it supposedly happened. I had been looking down at my phone, checking a Slack message from my team about a quarterly review. So I hadn't seen the contact, but I knew the rhythm of this family. I knew how Frank got when he lost things: his glasses, his keys, his mind. He never admitted to misplacing anything. It was always stolen. It was always a conspiracy, but usually, he blamed the maid, or me. Accusing a stranger in a public lobby was an escalation I hadn't anticipated. I stepped forward, my heels clicking on the marble, breaking my own paralysis. "Grant, stop," I said, my voice low. "Let security handle it. Stop making a scene." Grant spun on me, his eyes wild with adrenaline. "A scene, Vi? The guy robbed Grandpa. Are you seriously siding with him?" "I am not siding with anyone," I hissed. "I am saying you are screaming in the middle of the Hallowcrest." "Let them search him," Frank shouted again. My black leather wallet. It had $2,000 cash in it, and my cards, $2,000. Frank never carried that kind of cash. I looked at my grandfather. He was panting, his face sheen with sweat. He looked frail. Yes, but there was something else in his eyes, a hardness, a challenge. He was daring anyone to contradict him. Jordan Hale looked at the security guard. "I am not emptying my pockets in the lobby like a criminal. I have done nothing. Check your cameras. You have cameras everywhere, correct?" "We do," the lead officer said. "Then check them," Jordan challenged. "I will wait right here. or I will wait in your office, but I'm not turning out my pockets for this mob." The word mob made Grant bristle. He looked ready to throw a punch. The security team sensed the violence in the air. "Okay, folks, let's break this up," the lead officer said, signaling to his partner to cordon off the area. "Sir, come with us to the office. We will review the footage. Mr. Whitaker, please stay here with your family." The crowd was buzzing now. Phones were out. Recording. I could see the captions being written in real time on a dozen Instagram stories. Drama at the Hallowcrest. Thief caught red-handed. As the security team began to escort a very rigid, very angry Jordan Hale toward the back corridors, the hotel's security manager appeared. I knew he was the manager by the cut of his suit. It was navy, not the standard black uniform, and he wore an earpiece that looked expensive. He was a man in his 50s, with graying temples and eyes that had seen every variation of human dishonesty hotel life could offer. He didn't look at Frank. He didn't look at Grant, who was busy consoling my mother loudly. He looked at me. He walked over, cutting through the invisible barrier of the family circle. He stood close enough that I could smell the peppermint on his breath. "You are with this party?" he asked quietly. "I am," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "I'm his granddaughter, Violet Jenkins." He studied my face for a moment. It was a strange look. It wasn't accusatory. It was assessing. It was the look one professional gives another when they both realize something is structurally unsound. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, his voice dropping to a register that Grant couldn't hear over his own posturing. "I think it would be best if a member of the family accompanied us to the review room to verify the footage." "My brother is handling it," I said, gesturing to Grant. "I think," the manager said, and there was a weight to his words, a specific, intentional pressure, "that you should be the one to come. You seem observant." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and gestured for me to follow. I looked at my family. Grant was holding court, telling a couple from iconic Cincinnati society how he'd almost tackled the guy. Diane was fanning herself, playing the traumatized matriarch. Frank was staring at the floor, his jaw set in a grim line. None of them looked at me. They were too busy starring in their own movie. I turned and followed the manager. We walked down a long corridor lined with plush carpet, past the kitchens where the smell of roasting garlic clashed with the lobby's perfume. We stopped at a heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The manager swiped his keycard. The light turned green. "Ms. Jenkins," he said before he opened the door, "I want you to prepare yourself. Security cameras capture angles that the human eye misses. Sometimes they tell a story we aren't expecting." "I just want to clear this up," I said, though my voice sounded hollow. "If he took it, I want him prosecuted. If he didn't, I want to apologize." The manager nodded. "Fair enough." He pushed the door open. I stepped into the cool, dark room illuminated by a wall of monitors. The hum of the hard drives was the only sound. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing out the jazz, the lies, and the noise of my family. And standing there, looking at the frozen frame of the lobby on the main monitor, I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. I realized, with a clarity that made my hands shake, that this was not a misunderstanding. This wasn't a senile old man losing his wallet. The manager sat down at the console and reached for the controls. "Let's watch," he said. I took a breath and looked at the screen. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to watch the destruction of my family, frame by frame. The door to the security room clicked shut, sealing me inside a box of humming electronics and low-light monitors, but the noise of my family was still ringing in my ears. It was a specific frequency of chaos that I had been attuned to since I was 5 years old. Standing there, waiting for the security manager to pull up the file, I felt the familiar, heavy blanket of resignation settle over my shoulders. This was my role. This had always been my role. I was the designated sweeper in the Whitaker family circus, the one who walked behind the parade with a shovel to clean up the mess the elephants left behind. Growing up, the dynamic had been carved in stone before I could even read. Grant was the star. He was the firstborn, the son, the golden boy with the winning smile and the complete inability to accept fault. I was Violet. I was the sturdy one, the sensible one, the girl who didn't need attention, which was convenient because there was rarely any left over to give. If Grant broke a vase, it was an accident caused by the vase being placed too close to the edge. If I broke a vase, I was clumsy. If Grant failed a math test, the teacher was incompetent. If I got a B+, I wasn't applying myself. My mother, Diane, was the architect of this reality. She did not just favor Grant, she curated his existence. She smoothed the road before he even took a step, ensuring he never felt the bump of a mistake. And Grandpa Frank. Frank was the bank. He was the gravity that held the solar system together, not through affection, but through the sheer weight of his assets and his expectations. He was 80 years old now, a man who had built a mid-sized empire in logistics, and he wielded his money like a cudgel. He didn't demand love, he demanded loyalty, and more than that, he demanded that the Whitaker name remain pristine, polished, and above reproach. But age is a thief that even Frank Whitaker could not prosecute. Over the last year, I had watched the cracks form. Frank was forgetting things. Small things at first names of restaurants, where he put his glasses, whether he had paid the landscaper. But for a man whose identity was built on absolute control, these slips were not just annoyances. They were existential threats. He terrified us when he was angry, but he was terrified of being seen as weak. Diane and Grant had learned to weaponize this fear. Instead of helping him accept his limitations, they fed his delusions. If Frank lost his keys, Diane would insist the cleaning lady must have moved them. If he forgot an appointment, Grant would claim the secretary never sent the invite. They created a world where Frank was never wrong, which meant someone else always had to be the villain. Usually, that villain was a service worker, or a waiter, or me. I had been trained to absorb the blow. I had been pulled aside countless times at Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas parties and told to just let it go. Be the bigger person. Violet, my mother would say, her eyes hard and unyielding. Your brother is sensitive. Your grandfather is old. Just apologize and let us have a nice dinner. So I did. I apologized for things I didn't do. I yielded my time, my opinions, and my dignity, chipping away pieces of myself to patch the holes in their egos. I did it to keep the peace. I did it because it was easier than war. But what happened in the lobby was different. This wasn't a private dinner where I could swallow my pride and move on. This was a public execution of a stranger's character. I leaned against the cold wall of the security office, crossing my arms to stop my hands from trembling. The image of Jordan Hale's face burned in my mind. That was the detail I could not shake. I have worked in branding for a decade. I know what guilt looks like. Guilt is shifty. Guilt is loud and defensive, or it is overly accommodating. Guilt tries to negotiate. Jordan Hale had done none of those things. When Grant lunged at him, Jordan hadn't flinched in fear. He had flinched in confusion. He looked like a man who had been walking down the street and was suddenly hit by a piano falling from a window. There was no calculation in his eyes, only the raw, stunned processing of a man trying to understand why he was being assaulted. He didn't run. He didn't try to ditch the bag. He stood his ground and asked for evidence, and that was the problem. My family did not deal in evidence. They dealt in volume. The way Grant had acted, it gnawed at me. My brother is not a quick thinker. He is charismatic. Yes, but he is not sharp. He usually looks to our mother for cues on how to react. But in the lobby, Grant had been instantaneous. He had blocked Jordan's path with the confidence of a bouncer. He had shouted the accusation before Frank had even finished pointing. And then, the specific demands. Don't let him run. Empty his pockets. Grant had been ready. He had been too ready. It felt less like a reaction to a crime and more like the second act of a play he had memorized. Why was he so eager to have the man searched right there on the carpet? The Grant I knew would have called the manager and demanded they handle it while he got Frank a drink. He would not have risked a physical altercation unless he was absolutely certain of the outcome. or unless he was desperate to control the timeline. I watched the security manager type a password into the console. The screen flickered, loading the grid of camera feeds. My stomach twisted. If the footage showed Jordan taking the wallet, then my instincts were wrong, and I was just a cynical sister projecting my childhood trauma onto a clear-cut crime. But if the footage showed nothing, if it showed Jordan walking past without touching Frank, that was the scenario that terrified me, because I knew my family. I knew that if the truth contradicted their narrative, they wouldn't apologize. They would pivot. Diane would say the camera angle was bad. Grant would say the man must have used a partner. Frank would claim the hotel tampered with the tape. They would destroy this man's reputation rather than admit they were wrong. They would sue the hotel. They would drag this Jordan Hale through months of legal hell just to save face. And I would be the one expected to facilitate it. I would be the one asked to write the press release, to spin the story, to hush the witnesses. Do it for the family. Violet, do it so Grandpa doesn't have a stroke from the stress. I looked at the manager's back. He was silent, focused on his work. He was an impartial observer, a concept my family did not believe in. "We have excellent coverage in the lobby," the manager said, his voice cutting through my spiraling thoughts. 4 angles on the concierge desk alone. High definition, 48 frames per second. "Good," I said, though the word felt like ash in my mouth. "I am going to pull up the 5 minutes prior to the incident," he continued. "We will watch it in real time first, then we can slow it down." Okay. I took a step closer to the screens. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest, a physical drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I was about to see something that could not be unseen. I was about to look behind the curtain of the Whitaker family myth. I thought about the way Grant had looked at me when I told him to stop. There was no brotherly affection in his eyes. There was panic, not concern for Frank, but panic for himself. He looked like a man who was trying to hold a door shut while water poured in through the cracks. And Diane, my mother's immediate leap to, "We are being targeted." It was such a rehearsed line, a classic deflection to make us the victims before anyone could ask questions. It was the same logic she used when Grant got a DUI 5 years ago. It wasn't his fault. The police were targeting successful young men. It was the same logic when Frank made a bad investment the broker swindled him. It wasn't Frank's poor judgment, always the victim, always the hero, never the villain, but the camera lens is indifferent to narratives. It captures photons, not feelings. It captures geometry and time. "Here we go," the manager said. The screen filled with the image of the lobby from 5 minutes ago. I saw myself standing by the fern, looking at my phone. I saw Diane fussing with the bags. I saw Frank leaning on the counter, looking agitated. And then I saw Grant, in my memory. Grant had been near the luggage cart, but on the screen, he was moving. He was restless. He wasn't looking at his reflection. He was watching Frank. He was watching the elevators. He looked like a predator waiting in the tall grass. I held my breath. The sensation of impending disaster was so strong, I almost asked the manager to stop. I almost walked out and let them handle it. Let them steamroll the stranger. Let them win again. It would be so easy to just go back to the lobby and be the good granddaughter. But then I remembered Jordan's voice. "I am not going anywhere until you explain why I am being accosted." He was alone. He had no one in that lobby. My family was a pack of wolves, and he was just a man with a shopping bag. If I walked out, I was handing them the knife to skin him. I stayed. I fixed my eyes on the screen, and as the digital clock in the corner of the monitor ticked toward the moment of the scream, I prepared myself to witness the crime. I just didn't know yet who the criminal was going to be. The security office was a shrine to surveillance. One entire wall was dominated by a matrix of high-definition LCD screens, each one feeding a live stream from a different corner of the Hallowcrest Hotel. I saw the kitchen staff prepping dinner in Quadrant 4, the valet stand in Quadrant 2, and the quiet, carpeted stillness of the hallway outside the guest rooms in Quadrant 6. But my attention was locked onto the large central monitor where the security manager was queuing up the footage from the lobby. The resolution was startlingly crisp. You could see the individual patterns on the marble floor and the steam rising from coffee cups. It was a digital God's eye view, stripping away the noise and the emotion of the moment, leaving only the raw mechanics of movement. The manager, whose name tag read Miller, typed a command into his keyboard. "Here's the feed from camera 3, he said, pointing to the screen. "This is the wide angle covering the concierge and the main elevator bank. I am going to play it at normal speed first." I nodded, my arms wrapped tight around my waist. On the screen, the timestamp read 3:42 p.m. The scene played out. It was like watching a ghost story where I already knew the ending. I saw my family clustered by the desk. There was my mother, Diane, gesturing with a manic energy at the receptionist. There was Grandpa Frank, looking small and irritated, leaning his weight onto the counter, and there was Grant. I leaned in closer to the screen. In my memory of the event, which was barely 15 minutes old, Grant had been standing by the luggage cart, admiring himself, but the camera told a different story. Grant was not by the cart. He was hovering directly behind Frank. He was moving with a strange, nervous energy, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He wasn't looking at his reflection. He was scanning the room, his head swiveling left and right like he was checking for traffic before crossing a busy street. Then, the elevator doors in the upper left of the frame slid open. Jordan Hale stepped out. He walked with purpose. On the screen, his path was clear. He was heading for the revolving doors, a trajectory that would take him past the concierge desk, but not directly into it. However, the lobby was crowded. A group of tourists with oversized suitcases was clogging the main artery of the room, forcing the foot traffic to bottleneck right where my family was standing. "Watch closely," Miller said. On the screen, the bottleneck forced Jordan to step closer to the desk. He didn't slow down, but he angled his body to slide through the gap between a pillar and my grandfather. It was a tight squeeze. At 3:43 p.m. and 12 seconds, the contact happened. It was fast. In real time, it looked like a blur. Jordan's shoulder brushed against Frank's arm. It was the kind of incidental contact that happens 1,000 times a day in any city. On the screen, I saw Jordan immediately recoil. He pulled his arm back, dipped his head in a clear gesture of apology, and continued walking. He didn't break stride. He didn't look back. But Frank did. The reaction on the screen was instantaneous and violent. The moment Jordan passed, Frank slapped his hand to his jacket pocket. His face, even in the digital grain, twisted into a mask of pure fury. He shouted. I couldn't hear the audio, but I saw his mouth form the words. And then, Grant. This was the detail that made the hair on my arms stand up. Grant didn't look surprised. In the video, the moment Frank's hand hit his pocket, Grant was already moving. He didn't look at Frank to see what was wrong. He didn't look at the pocket. He lunged straight for Jordan. It was as if he had been waiting for a starting gun. His mouth opened in a scream that matched Frank's, a synchronized performance that felt too perfect to be natural. Miller paused the video. "That is what everyone in the lobby saw," he said, his voice neutral. "A bump, a check of the pocket, a reaction. If you were standing 10 feet away, it looks like a classic pickpocket maneuver. The distraction bump." I swallowed hard. It did look like that. If I were a juror watching this at normal speed, I might have been convinced. The timing was damnable, but something was wrong. "Can you rewind?" I asked. My voice sounded thin in the acoustic foam of the room. "Go back to right before the bump. I want to watch Grant." Miller glanced at me, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, but he tapped the keyboard. The video jumped back 10 seconds. I watched my brother again. This time, I ignored Jordan completely. I focused entirely on Grant Whitaker. He was standing behind Frank, slightly to the right. Frank was wearing his oversized tweed blazer, the one with the deep patch pockets. As the tourists clogged the path and Jordan began his approach, Grant took a half step forward. He moved into Frank's personal space, ostensibly to steady the old man or perhaps to point something out. But his hands, Grant's left hand was resting on Frank's shoulder, a gesture of comfort. But his right hand was down by his side, dangerously close to Frank's hip. "Pause," I said. Miller hit the spacebar. The image froze. Jordan was still 3 feet away, just entering the bottleneck. Grant was glued to Frank's back. "I need to see that right hand." I said, "Is there a better angle?" Miller nodded. "I can switch to camera 7. It is the overhead dome above the concierge. It gives a top-down view. It is steep, but it clears the line of sight." He keyed in the code. The main monitor flickered and replaced the wide shot with a bird's-eye view. We were looking down on the tops of their heads. From this angle, the distances were undeniable. I could see the gap between Frank and the counter. I could see the gap between Frank and the approaching stranger. And I could see Grant, tucked into the shadow of Frank's body like a parasite. "Play it," I whispered. Miller played the clip. From above, the choreography was chilling. As Jordan squeezed through the gap, creating the distraction, Grant's body shifted. He leaned into Frank. It looked like he was bracing the old man against the incoming tide of people, but in that split second of chaos, there was a flicker of motion. Something fast, something low. "There," Miller said, stopping the tape again. "Did you see that I had seen it? A flash of brown leather, a shape that appeared and disappeared in the gap between Frank's blazer and Grant's side." "Zoom in," I commanded. I felt sick. My stomach was churning with a mixture of dread and clarity. Miller drew a digital box around the area of Frank's pocket and expanded it. The image pixelated slightly, but the software smoothed the edges, rendering the scene in blocky but legible detail. "I want to see it in slow motion," I said, "as slow as you can go, frame by frame." Miller hesitated. His hand hovered over the dial. "Ms. Jenkins," he said softly, "once we see this, we cannot unsee it. If this is a criminal matter, this footage becomes evidence." "I know," I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. "Show me." He turned the dial. The video crawled forward. Time stretched out, turning seconds into minutes. On the screen, Jordan Hale entered the frame from the left. He was moving like a sloth in this speed. I watched his hands. His left hand was holding the shopping bag. His fingers were wrapped tight around the cord handles. His right hand was swinging naturally by his side. The collision happened. Jordan's shoulder touched Frank's. I held my breath. At this extreme slow speed, the truth was not just visible, it was screaming. Jordan's hand, the hand that was supposedly dipping into the pocket, was nowhere near the opening. It was flat against his own thigh. Palm open, fingers relaxed. He was simply walking. He made absolutely no move toward my grandfather's coat, but the pocket was moving. The fabric of Frank's tweed blazer rippled. The pocket flap lifted. And then, a hand appeared. It did not come from the left, where Jordan was standing. It came from the right. It came from behind. It was a hand wearing a heavy gold signet ring on the pinky finger. I stopped breathing. I knew that ring. I had helped pick it out for Grant's 30th birthday. It was a family crest ring, ostentatious and heavy, just like him. The hand slid into the pocket with the precision of a surgeon. It wasn't a fumble. It was a retrieval. The fingers hooked around the edge of the brown leather wallet. Frame, frame, frame. The wallet slid out. The hand, Grant's hand, pulled it backward, tucking it instantly against his own side, shielding it with his body. In the very next frame, Jordan completed his step and moved away. And in the frame after that, Grant's hand, now holding the wallet, disappeared behind his own back. He transferred the object. He moved it from his right hand to his left hand behind his spine. A magician's trick performed with terrifying competence. Then, he grabbed Frank's shoulder with both hands now empty and screamed. My grandpa accused a stranger, but the camera showed my brother robbing him. I stared at the screen. The image burned into my retinas. The pixelated gold ring glinted in the frozen light. It was Grant. It was undeniably, irrefutably Grant. He hadn't just reacted to a theft. He had engineered it. He had waited for a stranger to get close enough to serve as a scapegoat. And then he had picked his own grandfather's pocket. He had used Jordan Hale as a prop in a twisted performance. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. The hum of the servers sounded like a roaring ocean. Miller slowly took his hand off the control dial. He didn't look at me. He looked at the screen. His expression professional but grim. "That is not the stranger's hand," Miller said. It was a statement of fact, devoid of judgment, which made it hurt worse. "No," I whispered, "it isn't." My mind raced, trying to find an alternative explanation. Maybe Grant was trying to secure the wallet. Maybe he thought it was falling out and he grabbed it to keep it safe. But the logic crumbled instantly. If he was saving the wallet, why scream? Why accuse the stranger? Why demand a search? Why terrify Frank? No. This was malicious. This was calculated. I thought about Grant's urgency in the lobby. Don't let him run. Empty his pockets. He wanted Jordan searched. Why? Because he knew Jordan didn't have the wallet. A search would prove nothing, but the accusation would stick. The chaos would be absolute, and in the confusion, the wallet would remain missing. But why? Why steal $2,000 from Frank Grant had access to credit cards? He had an allowance. Petty theft didn't make sense, unless it wasn't about the money. I looked at the timestamp again. The whole event took less than 4 seconds. In 4 seconds, my brother had framed an innocent man and gaslit our entire family. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the console table. The betrayal was multi-layered. He had betrayed Frank's trust. He had betrayed me, dragging me into this farce, and he was currently destroying Jordan Hale's life just a few rooms away. "Ms. Jenkins," Miller asked gently. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing the image of the gold ring into the vault of my memory. I needed to be cold now. I needed to be the strategist. I couldn't be the sister anymore. The sister would cry. The sister would run out and scream at Grant. The sister would cause a scene that would get us all sued. Violet Jenkins, brand strategy lead, would not do that. Violet Jenkins would gather the data. Violet Jenkins would control the damage. I opened my eyes. "Can you save that clip?" I asked. The voice that came out of my throat was hard, unrecognizable. "I can," Miller said, "but I have to log it. If a crime has been committed on hotel property, and we have evidence." He left the sentence hanging. He was telling me that he couldn't just bury this. He was the security manager of the Hallowcrest. He had liabilities. "I understand." I said, "I am not asking you to delete it. I am asking you to secure it. Do not show it to anyone else yet. Not my brother, not my mother, not the police, not until I tell you to." Miller looked at me. He was assessing the risk. He saw a woman who had just realized she was sleeping in a nest of vipers. "I can hold it for an hour," he said. "After that, if the gentleman in custody demands the police, I have to hand it over." 1 hour, I said. I turned away from the screen. The image of Grant's hand was still hovering in the air before me. I needed to go back out there. I needed to look my brother in the face. I needed to stop them from destroying Jordan Hale before the clock ran out. But first, I needed to understand the game. Grant didn't steal a wallet for cash. Grant was lazy. But he wasn't stupid. He had a reason. And I had 60 minutes to figure out what he was hiding before I burned my family to the ground. I walked toward the door. The steel handle felt like ice under my palm. "Do not let them leave the hotel," I said to Miller without looking back. "I will keep the perimeter secure," he replied. I pushed the door open and stepped back into the corridor. The smell of roasting garlic hit me again, but this time, it just smelled like rot. I walked back toward the lobby, my heels clicking a rhythm on the floor. Click-clack, click-clack. Every step took me closer to the performance. But this time, I wasn't in the audience. I was the director, and I was about to call cut. The walk back from the security office to the main lobby felt like crossing a minefield. I had the truth burning a hole in my pocket, the mental image of Grant's gold ring slipping into Grandpa's coat, but I could not detonate it yet. Not here. Not with 50 strangers holding iPhones, ready to live stream the disintegration of the Whitaker family name. If I exposed Grant now, amidst the jazz music and the high tea service, the humiliation would kill Frank faster than any heart condition. I needed containment. I needed to separate the innocent man from the wolves, before I turned the gun on the pack. I paused at the edge of the carpet, taking a breath that tasted of recycled air and expensive perfume. "Give me 10 minutes," I had told Miller. "Keep the footage locked. Do not release it to the police until I give the signal." He had agreed, though his eyes told me he knew exactly what kind of game I was playing. It was the same game I played with corporate clients when a CEO tweeted something offensive at 2 in the morning. Freeze the narrative, control the damage, pivot. I stepped into the fray. The scene had not de-escalated. If anything, it had calcified. Jordan Hale was still hemmed in by the 2 junior security guards near the concierge desk. He looked like a prisoner of war, tired and resigned, stripped of his agency. Grant was pacing back and forth like a tiger in a cage, his energy manic, while Diane stood with her hand on her chest, performing the role of the fragile victim for a sympathetic circle of onlookers. "I just don't feel safe," I heard my mother say to a woman in pearls. "You think you come to a place like the Hallow Crest, and you leave the city behind, but the criminal element follows you everywhere." "Mom, stop," I said, my voice cutting through her monologue. I walked straight past her and approached the security guards surrounding Jordan. They looked ready to initiate a physical search. One of them was reaching for the lapel of Jordan's coat. "Do not touch him," I commanded. The guard froze. "Ma'am, your brother insisted." "My brother is not the head of security for this hotel, and neither are you," I said. Stepping between the guard and Jordan, I pitched my voice low, authoritative, the voice I used to fire underperforming marketing managers. "We are in the middle of a public lobby. You are not going to strip search a guest in front of a birthday party. Have some dignity." Grant appeared at my elbow instantly. "Vi, what are you doing? Get out of the way." "I am handling it," I said, refusing to look at him. I couldn't look at him. If I looked at his eyes, I would scream. "Officer, let Mr. Hale sit down. There is a bench right there. No one is running anywhere." "Violet," Diane's voice shrilled. She marched over, her heels stabbing the marble. "Are you protecting the thief? He stole your grandfather's wallet, $2,000. Violet, are you out of your mind?" "I am not protecting a thief. Mother, I am protecting us from a lawsuit." I lied. It was the only language she understood. "If we violate his civil rights in the lobby, we lose? Is that what you want?" Diane blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The threat of legal action always stunned her. Grant, however, was not deterred. He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. He pulled me physically away from Jordan, dragging me toward a potted palm in the corner. His grip was moist and desperate. "Lower your voice," he hissed. "You are embarrassing Grandpa. Look at him." I glanced over. Frank was sitting in a velvet armchair, looking pale and confused. He wasn't raging anymore. He looked deflated, a puppet whose strings had been cut. "I am not the one making a scene, Grant," I said, shaking his hand off my arm. "You are the one who demanded a witch hunt." "I am trying to get justice for Frank," Grant whispered furiously. "Why are you making this difficult? Just let them toss the guy, find the wallet, and we can go eat dinner." "Why do you always have to be the difficult one?" "Difficult." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "Is that what I am? I thought I was the one who fixed things." "Then fix this," Grant said. "Back me up. Tell them to search him. The guy is guilty. Vi, I saw him." "You saw him?" I asked. I looked directly at his face then. I searched for a flicker of shame, a tremor of guilt. There was nothing, just the flat, terrified determination of a liar who has gone too far to turn back. "I saw him bump Frank," Grant said, his eyes sliding away from mine. "I saw him reach. Just let the guards do their job." "They are doing their job," I said coldly. "They are reviewing the tapes." Grant flinched. It was micro-movement, a tiny twitch of his jaw muscle, but I caught it. "Tapes. Yes, they are watching everything in slow motion right now," I said. "Every angle, every hand, The color drained out of Grant's face so fast it was like someone had pulled a plug. You saw it. I am waiting for the report, I said, keeping the trap shut for one more minute. But until then, we are treating Mr. Hale like a human being. I turned my back on him and walked over to Jordan. He was sitting on the bench now, his posture rigid. He looked up at me as I approached. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently filled with a simmering anger that he was barely keeping a lid on. I appreciate the intervention, Jordan said. His voice was dry. You seem to be the only person in this zip code capable of speaking like an adult. I am sorry about the scene, I said. My family is high intensity. High intensity is one word for it, Jordan said. He gestured to the shopping bag on the floor next to him. Your brother seems convinced I have the crown jewels in there. Do you? I asked. See for yourself, Jordan said. He reached down, opened the bag, and tilted it toward me. I looked inside. I expected to see a shirt, maybe a gift box. Instead, I saw stacks of paper, manila folders, thick, bound documents with plastic covers. It looked like a portable filing cabinet. There was no wallet, there was no merchandise, just heavy, boring paperwork. I am not here for the party, Jordan said, watching my face. I am here for a meeting. I flew in this morning. These are audits. I was heading to the business center to print a cover sheet when your grandfather decided I was a pickpocket. Audits, I asked. I'm an internal auditor, he said. Not exactly a profession known for thrill-seeking crimes. The absurdity of it hit me. Grant had framed an auditor. Of all the people in the lobby, the tourists, the kids, the distracted parents, Grant had chosen the one man whose entire career was built on tracking details and exposing fraud. It was almost poetic. Officer, I said to the guard, check the bag. The guard stepped forward, ruffled through the papers, patted down the sides of the bag. He looked up, disappointed. Nothing here, ma'am, just papers. What? Grant's voice cracked from across the circle. He rushed back over. That's impossible. Check his pockets. He probably shoved it in his coat lining. Grant, stop, I said. He hid it, Grant shouted. He was losing control. The narrative was fraying. If it's not on him, he tossed it. He probably dropped it in a planter when I grabbed him, or he handed it off to someone else. I watched my brother unravel. This was the tell. If Grant truly believed Jordan had the wallet, he would be confused that it wasn't there. He would be asking if Jordan dropped it, but Grant wasn't confused. He was insistent. He didn't want the wallet found. He wanted the guilt established. If he tossed it, I said calmly, then it is somewhere in the lobby. The staff will find it, but it is not on Mr. Hale. We can't let him go, Grant insisted. If he leaves, he gets away with it. Gets away with what? Grant, I asked. The wallet is gone. If he doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. He's a thief, Grant pointed a finger at Jordan, who was now standing up, clutching his bag of audits. Sir, Jordan said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. You have accused me of a felony in front of 50 witnesses. You have detained me against my will, and now that you have found nothing, you are inventing conspiracies. I suggest you stop talking before you make my defamation lawsuit even easier to win. Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Diane for help. Well, Diane sniffed, clutching her pearls. It is very suspicious. A man running away with a bag. I wasn't running, Jordan corrected, and it's a bag of tax documents. I am going to check the perimeter, the lead guard said, clearly eager to escape the tension. If the wallet was dropped, we will find it. You do that, I said. I turned to Jordan. The crowd was starting to disperse, disappointed by the lack of a climax. There were no handcuffs, no dramatic tackle, just a misunderstanding and a lot of paperwork. Mr. Hale, I said, lowering my voice. I am going to get to the bottom of this. I promise you. I believe you, he said. He reached into his coat pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a business card. He handed it to me. But believing you doesn't change the fact that I have been humiliated. I know, I said. I will fix it. You keep saying that, he said. But I don't think you know what is actually broken. I looked at him, puzzled. What do you mean? Jordan leaned in. He was close enough that I could see the flecks of gray in his eyes. He didn't look like a victim anymore. He looked like a man who was putting a puzzle together in his head. I didn't bump your grandfather, he said softly. I was pushed, but not by the crowd. What? And I wasn't just walking to the business center, he continued. I had a meeting scheduled, at 4 p.m., in the library. Okay, I said, not following. The meeting was with a representative from the Whitaker Family Trust, he whispered. My blood ran cold. The Whitaker Family Trust. That was the entity that managed Frank's assets. It was the black box that paid for the house, the cars, and Grant's lifestyle. Who were you meeting? I asked. I don't know, Jordan said. They never gave a name, just a time. 4 p.m. He checked his watch. It was 4:15. I missed it, he said, because I was being held here. He looked over my shoulder at Grant, who was busy berating a bellhop about looking under the sofa cushions. You think this is about a wallet? Jordan said. But from where I'm standing, it looks like a very effective delay tactic. Someone wanted me detained. Someone wanted to make sure I didn't walk into that library at 4 o'clock. He picked up his bag and straightened his coat. I'm going to my room, he said. If the police come, call me. If not, I expect a formal written apology by morning. He turned and walked away, heading toward the elevators. I stood there, frozen. The noise of the lobby rushed back in the clatter of silverware, the laughter, the jazz piano. But I couldn't hear any of it. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Grant hadn't just stolen the wallet to be petty. He hadn't just done it for the cash. He had caused a scene to stop Jordan from attending a meeting. I looked at Grant. He was sweating. He was wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, looking at the elevators where Jordan had just vanished. He didn't look like a man who had lost a wallet. He looked like a man who had just dodged a bullet. Violet, Diane called out. Come help your grandfather. He needs water. I didn't move. A meeting with the trust, an audit, a delay. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place, and the picture they formed was hideous. This wasn't just a dysfunctional family drama. This was a cover-up. I pulled out my phone and looked at the business card Jordan had given me. Jordan Hale. Senior Forensic Accountant. Hale Associates. Forensic Accountant. That wasn't just an auditor. That was a fraud hunter. I looked back at Grant. He was smiling now. A weak, shaky smile, patting Frank on the back. It's okay, Grandpa, I heard him say. We'll find it. The bad man is gone. The bad man wasn't gone. The bad man was wearing a polo shirt and standing right next to the victim. I slipped the card into my pocket. I needed to see that video again. I needed to see exactly what Grant did with the wallet. And more importantly, I needed to find out what was in the library that Grant was so terrified of Jordan seeing. Coming, Mother, I said. I walked toward them, wearing the mask of the dutiful daughter. But underneath, I was already planning the interrogation. The cold open was over. Now, the investigation began. I slipped back into the security office, the heavy steel door clicking shut behind me and severing the connection to the lobby's noise. The silence here was mechanical, humming with the sound of cooling fans and hard drives. Miller, the security manager, was still seated at the console, his face bathed in the blue light of the monitors. He didn't look surprised to see me return. He looked like a man who had been expecting the other shoe to drop. I need a copy of that file, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I need the clip of the lobby from 3:42 to 3:45. Raw footage, no edits. Miller sighed, swiveling his chair to face me. He clasped his hands over his stomach. Ms. Jenkins, I cannot just hand over surveillance footage to a guest. That is a violation of privacy protocols. If there is a police investigation, I will release it to the detective in charge. If there is a subpoena, I will release it to the lawyers. But I cannot give it to you just because you asked nicely. I am not asking nicely, I said. leaning my hands on the desk. "I am asking you to help me prevent a crime that is currently in progress. You saw what I saw. That wasn't a pickpocketing. That was a setup. I saw an anomaly." Miller corrected, his tone guarded. "But I am not a judge, and you are not the police." I realized pushing him would be futile. He was a creature of protocol, and right now, protocol was his shield against liability. I needed a different approach. I didn't need the file physically in my hand. I just needed the data, the details, the receipts. "Fine," I said, pulling my smartphone from my pocket. "I won't ask for the file, but I am going to document what I saw." Miller hesitated, then gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He turned back to the screen, leaving the freeze frame of Grant's hand hovering near Frank's pocket visible. I raised my phone and snapped a photo of the screen. The image was grainy, capturing the pixelation of the monitor, but the timestamp was clear 3:43 in the afternoon. I took another photo of the wide shot, establishing the location. Then, I opened my notes app. This was a muscle memory from my career in brand strategy. When a crisis hits, you document everything. You create a paper trail so dense that no amount of spin can penetrate it. I typed furiously. Subject Grant Whitaker, location Hallowcrest lobby, time 3:43 p.m. Action removed wallet from Frank Whitaker's right jacket pocket, transfer to left hand, concealment behind back, simultaneous verbal accusation against Jordan Hale. I recorded the camera number camera 7, I recorded the frame rate, I recorded the names of the security staff present. I was building a dossier. If Grant tried to gaslight me later, if he tried to say I imagined it, I would have the metadata. "Thank you." "Miller," I said, pocketing my phone, "keep that footage safe." "I will archive it," he said. For 24 hours, I left the room. The transition back to the lobby felt like stepping onto a stage mid-performance. The crowd had thinned, but the tension was still thick in the air. My family had moved to a cluster of leather armchairs near the fireplace. It was a tableau of dysfunction. Frank was slumped in a high-backed chair, looking older than his 80 years. Diane was hovering over him with a glass of water, murmuring soothing nonsenses, and Grant was standing guard. That was the only way to describe it. He wasn't sitting. He was standing behind Frank's chair, his eyes scanning the room, his posture rigid. He looked less like a grandson and more like a warden. I approached slowly, keeping my face neutral. As I got closer, I heard a sound that made Grant jump. It was Frank's cell phone. It was buzzing on the small table next to his elbow. Frank reached for it, his hand trembling slightly. "It's probably the bank," he mumbled. "I need to call them to cancel the cards." "No," Grant said. The word was sharp, immediate. He snatched the phone from the table before Frank's fingers could graze the screen. "Don't worry about it. Grandpa, you are too upset. I will handle it." But Frank started. "I said I will handle it." Grant snapped. He looked at the caller ID, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of genuine panic in his eyes. He didn't answer the call. He swiped the decline button and shoved the phone into his own pocket. "It's just spam. Probably a telemarketer." I stopped 10 feet away, watching this interaction. Frank Whitaker was a man who had run a logistics empire for 40 years. He did not let people screen his calls. He did not let people tell him what was spam. But he sat there and let Grant pocket his phone. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had been told he was incompetent so many times that he had finally started to believe it. Grant wasn't just helping him, he was isolating him. He was severing Frank's lines of communication. I walked up to the circle. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Grant spun around, his hand still on his pocket where he had stashed Frank's phone. "Just managing the stress." "Vi, Grandpa is tired. We should probably get him up to the room." "Not yet," Diane said. "We haven't had the cake cutting. The guests are waiting." Diane's priorities were always consistent. The show must go on, even if the lead actor was having a breakdown. I sat down on the arm of Frank's chair. "Grandpa," I said softly, "are you sure it was the wallet?" "Could you have left it in the room?" Frank looked up at me. His eyes were watery, confused. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could make a sound, His eyes darted to Grant. It was a reflex. He was checking for permission. Grant gave a slight shake of his head. I felt it, Frank said. His voice rehearsed. I felt the tug. And then it was gone. It is a small matter, Violet. Just money. Don't worry about it. Just money. Frank Whitaker would chase a waiter down for a 10-cent overcharge. He did not treat $2,000 as a small matter. He was reciting a script. Excuse me, Ms. Jenkins. I turned. A young woman in a hotel uniform was standing behind me. She held a silver tray with empty water glasses, but her eyes were fixed on me. I recognized her. She was the concierge who had checked us in earlier that day. Yes. Can I have a quick word? She whispered. I stood up and followed her a few steps away, out of Grant's earshot. She looked nervous, glancing back at the front desk, as if she were breaking a rule. I shouldn't say anything, she said, keeping her voice low. But I saw what happened with the gentleman, Mr. Hale, and I saw how upset your grandfather is. Yes, it is very unfortunate, I said. The thing is, she continued, shifting the tray on her hip, your grandfather was very agitated when he checked in today, before the wallet thing. He was arguing with your brother about the room amenities, arguing about what I asked. The safe, she said. Mr. Whitaker wanted to ensure the room had a specific type of digital safe. He was very insistent. He said he had things to secure. Your brother told him to calm down, that the room was standard. But Mr. Whitaker was well. He was loud about it. I felt a chill run down my spine. Frank wasn't worried about his wallet. He was worried about the safe. The wallet was a decoy. The real asset, whatever it was something that needed to be locked up in the room. Thank you, I said. That is helpful. I walked back toward the family, my mind racing. If Frank was focused on the safe, then whatever he brought with him was valuable. And if Grant had staged the theft to keep Jordan Hale downstairs, I needed to hear what Grant was saying when he thought I wasn't listening. I didn't rejoin the circle immediately. I drifted behind a large decorative column wrapped in ivy, pretending to check my makeup in a mirror. From this angle, I was hidden from their direct line of sight, but I could hear them perfectly. Grant was leaning in close to Diane. His voice was a harsh whisper. Needs to stop asking questions, he said. She is just trying to help, Diane replied. Her voice was anxious. She is making it worse. Grant hissed. If the wallet is found right away, it ruins the plan. We need the delay. We need tonight. The sentence hung in the air like smoke. It was the confirmation I needed. The theft wasn't the crime. The theft was the mechanism. The crime was something else, and it required time. It required a night where everyone was distracted, where Jordan Hale was detained, and where Frank was confused and isolated. I stepped out from behind the pillar, my face arranged into a mask of concern. I am going to the ladies' room, I announced loud enough for them to hear. I will be right back. Grant nodded, looking relieved to have me gone. Take your time, he said. I turned and walked toward the restrooms, but the moment I was out of their sight line, I veered sharp left. I bypassed the bathrooms and headed straight for the front desk. I approached the young concierge who had spoken to me earlier. Her name tag read, Sarah, I said, leaning over the high marble counter. I need a favor, and I need you to be discreet. She looked at me, eyes wide. What can I do? Ms. Jenkins, I need to know about my grandfather's room assignment. I said, I know you can't give me a key, but I need to know the history of the booking. Was there a change made today? Sarah hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. I really shouldn't share guest data, Sarah, I said, dropping my voice. My grandfather is 80. He's confused. He thinks he was robbed. I'm trying to figure out if he is having a cognitive episode or if something else is going on. Please, help me take care of him. The appeal to empathy worked. It always does. Sarah nodded and typed in Frank's name. Okay, she said, reading the screen. Mr. Whitaker was originally assigned to room 402. It is a deluxe king on the 4th floor. And now now he is in room 819, she said. It was changed at 12:30 p.m. today. Who changed it, I asked. The notes say Mr. Grant Whitaker requested the change upon arrival. She said. She looked up at me. He said his grandfather needed to be closer to the elevators for mobility reasons. I stared at her. Room 819. Sarah, I said, is room 819 closer to the elevator than 402? She frowned, checking the floor plan. No, actually, 402 is right next to the lift. 819 is at the end of the hall. It is a corner suite. It is the furthest room from the elevator on that floor. I felt the blood drain from my face. Grant had lied. He hadn't moved Frank to help him walk. He had moved him to the most isolated room in the hotel. He had moved him away from the foot traffic, away from the cameras, away from witnesses. And he had done it immediately upon arrival. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was premeditated. The wallet, the scene in the lobby, the accusation against Jordan, it was all smoke. The fire was burning on the 8th floor. And whatever Grant was after, it was inside that room, or more specifically, inside that safe. Thank you. Sarah, I said, you have been incredibly helpful. I walked away from the desk, my mind assembling the timeline. Grant moves Frank to an isolated room at 12:30. Jordan Hale arrives for a 4 o'clock meeting with the trust. Grant sees Jordan, or knows he is coming, and stages a theft at 3:43 to intercept him. Grant isolates Frank, takes his phone, and ensures no one goes up to the room. Why? Because Grant needed to get into that safe. And he needed Frank downstairs, distracted and terrified while he did it. But Grant was here in the lobby. He couldn't be in 2 places at once, unless he wasn't doing it alone, or unless he had already done it, and the scene in the lobby was the cover-up for a theft that had already happened. I checked my watch. 4:30. If Grant had moved the room to the end of the hall, he wanted privacy. I looked across the lobby. Grant was still guarding Frank. He looked smug. He thought he had won. He thought I was in the bathroom applying lipstick. He had no idea that I had just mapped out his entire deception. I wasn't going to the bathroom. I was going to the 8th floor. I needed to see room 819. I needed to see what was worth destroying a stranger's life for. I walked toward the elevators, keeping my head down. The cold open was finished. The paper trail was established. Now, it was time to break into the crime scene. I stepped away from the elevators, retreating into the alcove of a quiet corridor that led to the hotel's business center. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from exertion, but from the terrifying clarity of the picture that was forming. I had the timeline. I had the motive of isolation. Now, I needed the financial trail. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mara Klein. Mara was a vice president at the regional bank where Grandpa Frank had held his primary accounts for 40 years. She was also my college roommate. We had spent 4 years sharing a dorm, and I knew she would pick up on the first ring. VI. Her voice was warm, but surprised. It is Saturday. You never call on Saturdays unless the world is ending or you have found a vintage blazer you need me to talk you out of. I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said, skipping the pleasantries. I am in Cincinnati with Grandpa. Something is wrong. Is he okay? Is it his heart? His heart is fine. His accounts might not be, I said. I kept my voice low, turning my back to the corridor. Mara, I know you cannot give me official statements without a power of attorney. I am not asking for balances. I am asking for a wellness check. Has there been any activity on Frank Whitaker's personal checking or the trust interface in the last 48 hours that looks uncharacteristic? There was a pause on the line. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. Mara was already logging in. She knew Frank. She knew he was a man of rigid habits who paid his bills on the first and bought groceries on Thursdays. Violet, Mara said, her tone shifting from friend to banker. You know I can get fired for this. I know, I said. But if my grandfather is being exploited, you are the only one who can see it before Monday morning. Give me a second, she whispered. I waited. The seconds stretched out. I watched a bellhop push a cart full of luggage past the end of the hall. He looked happy. Ignorant. I envied him. Okay, Mara said, her voice tight. I am looking at the flags. The system triggers a soft alert for unusual patterns. Nothing that freezes the account. Just advisory warnings. What kind of warnings? Cash, she said. Significant cash movement. In the last 3 weeks, there have been 4 withdrawals from the main checking account. Physical withdrawals. Violet. Not transfers. How much? I asked. $9,000 each time, she said. Just under the $10,000 reporting limit. That is structuring. Violet, that is what people do when they don't want the IRS to flag a transaction. Structuring. My stomach dropped. Frank Whitaker didn't structure. Frank Whitaker declared every cent. He was terrified of the government. And, Mara continued, there was a pending authorization request this morning. A transfer request from the holding account to an external LLC I don't recognize. It was flagged for review because the signature didn't match the biometric profile perfectly. It looks shaky. Did it go through? No. It is in pending status until Monday unless verified by phone, Mara said. But Violet, the authorization came from a device that isn't his usual iPad. It came from a mobile login. Grant, I whispered. I didn't say that, Mara said quickly. But if you are asking me if this looks like Frank buying a new boat, no. This looks like a bleed, a rapid, clumsy bleed. Thank you, Mara, I said. Freeze it. Can you freeze it? I can put a 24-hour hold for suspicious activity, she said. But if the account holder calls and verifies, I have to lift it. Do it, I said. He won't call. Someone else might. But Frank won't. I hung up. The phone felt heavy in my hand. $9,000, 4 times, $36,000 in cash, gone in 3 weeks, and a pending transfer that was likely much larger. That was why Grant needed the delay. That was why he needed the weekend. The transfer was stuck. He needed to get Frank to verify it, or he needed to access the physical tokens, the secure keys that Frank kept in his safe to override the bank's security. I walked back to the lobby. The anger I felt now was different from the annoyance I had felt earlier. It was cold. It was calculating. Grant was still standing by Frank's chair, scrolling on his phone, on Frank's phone. He was probably trying to clear the bank notification before Frank saw it. I walked right up to him. I didn't care about the guests anymore. Grant, I said. He looked up, startled. Back already? That was fast? What are you doing with the accounts? I asked. I didn't whisper. I spoke in a normal, conversational volume that carried just enough to make him freeze. What? He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. What are you talking about? I just got off the phone with the bank. I lied. They called me. They flagged a transfer, $9,000. Grant repeatedly. Diane, who had been fixing Frank's collar, spun around. Violet, keep your voice down. No. Mother, I said, looking at Grant. I want to know why Grant is withdrawing cash just under the federal reporting limit. I want to know why there is a pending transfer to an LLC that Grandpa doesn't own. Grant stood up. He shoved Frank's phone into his pocket. You are delusional. You are imagining things. I help Grandpa with his bills. He knows about it. Tell her. Grandpa? Frank looked up, his eyes hazy. What bills? Yes. Grant helps with the bills. Good boy. See? Grant sneered. He knows. You are just trying to stir up trouble because you are useless here. You come down from Cleveland for one day and think you run the show. It isn't jealousy, Violet, Diane chimed in, stepping between me and Grant. Her face was flushed with indignation. You have always been like this. Always looking for reasons to tear your brother down. You can't stand that your grandfather relies on him and not you. Relies on him. I looked at my mother. He is bleeding him dry. Mom, can't you see it? The room change, the wallet, the bank, it is all one thing. Stop it, Diane hissed. You are ruining the birthday. Just stop it. You are jealous because Grant is the heir to the business and you are just corporate support. The words hung in the air. Just corporate support. It was a sentiment I had suspected for years. But hearing her say it out loud, with such venom, felt like a slap. But strangely, it didn't hurt. It clarified. It severed the last thread of obligation I felt to protect her feelings. "Okay," I said. "I am done arguing." My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. It was a text from a number I didn't save, but I recognized the area code. Jordan Hale. "I am currently in my room. I have contacted my firm's legal counsel. I would prefer to handle this quietly to avoid a PR nightmare for the charity I represent. But if I am not cleared within the hour, I am calling the Cincinnati Police Department to file a report for unlawful detention and defamation. I will name your brother. I will name you. TikTok." I stared at the screen. Jordan wasn't bluffing. He was giving me a chance to do the right thing before he scorched the earth. I looked at Grant. He was back to whispering in Frank's ear, probably convincing him that I was hysterical. I turned on my heel and walked back to the security desk. The piece was over. Miller was gone, replaced by a younger supervisor. I didn't have time to build rapport. "I need to file an internal incident report," I said. "Right now, concerning the accusation made by Frank Whitaker against Jordan Hale." The supervisor blinked. "Ma'am, we usually handle that internally." "I am the family representative," I said sharply. "I am making a formal statement for your insurance records. I want it noted that I, Violet Jenkins, dispute the accusation. I want it noted that the family does not wish to press charges." "Okay," the supervisor said, pulling out a tablet. "I can note that." "And," I added, taking a gamble, "I need to confirm the access logs for the 8th floor for the safety of my grandfather." "I can't give you logs," he said automatically. "I don't need the physical logs," I said, leaning in. "I just need you to answer one question. Did anyone access the 8th floor using a key card assigned to the Whitaker party before my grandfather checked in at 2 o'clock? The supervisor hesitated. He looked at his screen. He tapped a few keys. His eyebrows went up. "Well," he said, "that is odd." "What is odd?" "A key card. The secondary key for room 819 was used to access the floor at 1:15 p.m., he said, 45 minutes before Mr. Whitaker checked in at the desk." "Who was the card issued to?" I asked, though I already knew. "It was issued to Mr. Grant Whitaker," he said. I closed my eyes. There it was, the physical smoking gun. Grant had checked in early, or at least got the keys early. He had gone up to the room, the isolated room at the end of the hall, alone. He had 45 minutes inside that room before Frank ever arrived. He had 45 minutes to tamper with the safe, or to plant something, or to set up the scenario that would require him to return later that night. "Thank you," I said. I walked away from the desk and dialed a number I had hoped never to use for family business. Elliot Marsh was a civil litigation attorney in Cleveland. He was expensive, aggressive, and had a moral compass that was functional but flexible enough to handle complex family destruction. "Violet," he answered, "this is a billable Saturday." "Bill me," I said. "I have a situation. Potential civil conspiracy, defamation, false imprisonment, and probable elder financial abuse." "Jesus, Violet," Elliot exhaled. "Who is the client?" "The client is me," I said. "But the victims are my grandfather and a stranger named Jordan Hale." I gave him the summary, the 3-minute version, the camera footage I saw, the room change, the bank flags, the earlier access to the room. When I finished, the line was silent for a moment. "Violet," Elliot said, his voice devoid of its usual sarcasm, "you understand what you are describing. This isn't just a family spat. If your brother staged a theft to detain a forensic accountant, that is criminal. If he touched the accounts, that is fraud. If you cover for him, you are an accessory." "I am not covering for him," I said. "That is why I'm calling you. What do I do?" "You have to separate yourself," Elliot said, "and you have to stop the defamation immediately. If this Jordan Hale sues, he will win. The hotel has the tapes. You have the knowledge. You need to secure the evidence, and you need to get that man released from whatever hold the hotel has on him. And Grant, I asked, if you proceed with this, Elliot said, you are effectively handing your brother over to the authorities, or at the very least, you are ending his life as he knows it. There is no going back to Thanksgiving dinner after this. I looked across the lobby. Grant was laughing at something Diane said. They looked so united, a fortress of delusion. There hasn't been a real Thanksgiving in 10 years. Elliot, I said, I want to retain you. I want you to represent Jordan Hale's interests against my family until he can get his own counsel. Can you do that? Can you broker a ceasefire? I can try, Elliot said. But you need to give me something to trade. I need the tapes. I have photos of the tapes, I said, and I can get the manager to hold the originals. Good, Elliot said. I will call the hotel legal department. I will get the hold on Mr. Hale lifted, but Violet, once I make that call, the hotel is going to turn on your brother. They will ban him. They might call the cops themselves to cover their liability. Let them, I said. Are you sure? I looked at Frank. He was staring into space, his hands shaking on the armrest. He looked frail and scared. He wasn't the tyrant I remembered. He was just an old man being gaslit by the people he paid to love him. And then I looked at the elevators, where Jordan Hale was sitting in a room, waiting for the police, wondering why the world was so unjust. I am sure, I said. Do it. I hung up. The decision settled in my chest like a heavy stone. I had just declared war. There would be no more keeping the peace. There would be no more protecting the family name. I walked toward the elevators. I wasn't going back to the armchairs. I wasn't going to sit and listen to Diane complain about the service. I was going to find Jordan Hale. And then, I was going to bring him down to the lobby and burn Grant's story to the ground. But first, I had one more stop. I had to get everyone into a room where they couldn't run away. I needed a venue for the execution. I stopped a passing event coordinator. Excuse me, I said, flashing my most professional smile. My grandfather is feeling a bit overwhelmed by the noise in the lobby. Is there a small conference room available nearby just for 10 minutes? We need to sort out a private family matter. The coordinator smiled. Of course. The parlor room is just off the main hall. It is empty. I can open it for you. Perfect, I said. I looked back at Grant one last time. He was comfortable. He felt safe. He had no idea that I had just booked the room for his trial. The plan formed in my mind with the architectural precision of a rebranding campaign. I had the raw data. The camera footage, the bank alerts, the room switch, and the timeline, but data alone does not win arguments in the Whitaker family. Emotion wins. Spectacle wins. If I just told them the truth, they would shout over me. They would call me a liar. I needed to corner them in a space where they could not look away. I walked back to the cluster of armchairs where my mother was still holding court. The lobby was beginning to fill with the evening dinner crowd, the noise level rising to a hum that made private conversation difficult. This was to my advantage. Mom, Grant, I said, pitching my voice to be heard over the piano but low enough to sound intimate. We cannot resolve this here. People are staring. I have arranged for a private room just off the hallway, the parlor room. We can sit down, have some water, and wait for security to finish their sweep without 50 strangers watching us. Diane looked around, noticing the eyes of a couple at the next table. You are right. It is humiliating sitting here like display animals. Exactly, I said. Let's go to the parlor room. Grant, you bring Mom. I will take Grandpa up to his room for just 5 minutes to freshen up and check the safe, just to be absolutely sure the wallet isn't sitting on the dresser. Grant stiffened. His head snapped up from his phone. No, there is no point. I already checked the room. You checked it hours ago. Grant, I said, keeping my tone breezy. Maybe it fell behind the nightstand. Grandpa is stressed. A few minutes of quiet will do him good. We will meet you in the parlor room in 10 minutes. I will come with you, Grant said, starting to rise. Someone needs to stay with Mom, I countered, looking at Diane. She is shaking. Grant, she needs her son right now. I used his own weapon against him, Diane's neediness. Grant hesitated, looking between Frank and Diane. He was trapped. If he insisted on coming upstairs, he looked paranoid and neglected our mother. If he stayed, he left me alone with Frank. Fine, Grant snapped, sitting back down. But be quick. We have guests arriving for dinner at 6. 10 minutes, I promised. I helped Frank up from the chair. He felt light, his arm frail under the heavy tweed of his jacket. Come on, Grandpa, let's go wash your face. As we walked toward the elevators, I made a detour to the security desk. Miller was back, looking grim. Mr. Miller, I said, stopping at the counter. I need you to do 2 things for me. First, archive that footage on a separate drive. Do not leave it on the network where it can be accidentally corrupted. Lock it down. Miller nodded. Already done. Ms. Jenkins, I put it on a physical drive in the safe. Good. Second, I need you to unlock the parlor room for my family, and I need you to bring a laptop and a projector in there. Tell them it is for a family slideshow. Miller looked at me, his eyes narrowing. A slideshow. We are going to review the evidence, I said. I want you there, and I want the footage ready to play. Ms. Jenkins, if this goes south— It won't, I said. It will end it. Just be there in 15 minutes. I guided Frank to the elevators. As the doors slid open, I saw a figure standing near the potted ficus, watching us. It was Jordan Hale. He had not gone to his room. He was waiting. I handed Frank his cane. Hold the door for a second. Grandpa. I stepped out and walked over to Jordan. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Mr. Hale, I said quietly, I need one thing from you. A lawyer, he asked. A statement, I said. Write it down, right now. The time you arrived in the lobby, the reason you were here, the meeting with the trust, the fact that you never touched Frank Whitaker. Sign it, date it. Why? Because in 20 minutes, I am going to clear your name. I said, but I need your version on paper so they cannot say I invented it. Can you do that? He studied my face for a second, then reached into his bag and pulled out a notepad. I will bring it to the desk. No, I said. Bring it to the parlor room. When I open the door, you walk in. I turned and got back into the elevator before he could ask questions. The doors closed, sealing me in with my grandfather. The ride to the 8th floor was silent. Frank leaned against the handrail, staring at the floor numbers as they ticked upward. I don't know why everyone is so angry, Frank whispered. I just wanted to have a nice dinner. I know, Grandpa, I said, squeezing his hand. We are going to fix it. The elevator dinged at the 8th floor. The hallway was long and empty, the carpet swallowing the sound of our footsteps. We walked all the way to the end, to room 819. Grant had chosen well. It was a corner suite, isolated from the rest of the floor. If someone screamed in here, no one would hear it. I used Frank's keycard to open the door. The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. It smelled of stale air and cleaning chemicals. Sit down, Grandpa, I said, guiding him to the edge of the bed. I walked straight to the closet where the safe was located. Standard hotel issue, digital keypad, 4 digits to lock, 4 digits to open. Grandpa, I said, do you use the safe? Always, he said, rubbing his knees. I put my papers in there, and the extra keys. What papers? I asked, kneeling in front of the safe. The trust papers, he said vaguely. Grant said I needed to sign them this weekend. He said we needed to update the beneficiaries. My heart stopped. Update the beneficiaries. That was it. That was the endgame. I looked at the safe. The display was dark. I pressed a button to wake it up. The screen didn't ask for a code. It flashed a red message, System Lockout. Wait 15 minutes. I stared at the red letters. A hotel safe only locks out after 3 failed attempts to enter the code. Grandpa, I said slowly, did you try to open this safe recently? No, he said. I put the things in when we got here. I haven't touched it since. Grant has a key to this room, doesn't he? Yes, Frank said. In case I fall. I took a picture of the safe's display with my phone. 3 failed attempts. Grant had come up here during his 45-minute window. He had tried to get the papers or the keys that Frank kept inside, but he didn't know the code. Frank must have set a new code. One Grant hadn't guessed. That was why Grant needed the wallet. He wasn't stealing cash. He was stealing Frank's identity to reset the safe or to verify a bank transfer that required two-factor authentication. Or maybe the code was written on a slip of paper inside that wallet. I stood up and walked into the bathroom. I needed to see if Grant had left any other traces of his panic. The bathroom was pristine, the towels folded, but I checked the small chrome trash can under the sink. It had been emptied by housekeeping, but there was one small item at the bottom, stuck to the side liner. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a torn corner of a heavy, cream-colored envelope, the kind banks use for official correspondence. I smoothed it out. There was no writing on it, but there was a logo fragment, a blue shield, the logo of the Whitaker Family Trust. Grant had opened Frank's mail. He had intercepted something before Frank even saw it. He had probably torn it up in a rage when he realized he couldn't get into the safe to hide the rest of the evidence. I wrapped the scrap of paper in a tissue and put it in my pocket. "Violet," Grant's voice came from the doorway. I spun around. He was standing there, chest heaving slightly, his face slick with sweat. He had run all the way from the lobby. "What are you doing in the bathroom?" he asked. His voice was tight, aggressive. "I am checking the counters," I said, walking out calmly. Grandpa thought he might have left the wallet by the sink. "It's not there," Grant said, stepping into the room. He blocked the path to the door. "I told you it's not there. Why are you digging around?" "I am thorough, Grant," I said. "You know that." "We need to go down," he said. "Now, Mom is waiting." He was looking at the closet. His eyes darted to the safe for a fraction of a second, checking the display. He saw the red lockout message. He knew that I had seen it. "Grant," I said, pitching my voice loud enough to carry into the hallway. "Why is the safe locked out? Did someone try to break into it?" "Shh," he hissed, closing the door behind him. "Keep your voice down." "No," I shouted. "If someone tried to break into the safe, we need to call security. Maybe the thief is still in the hotel." "Stop it," he said, advancing on me. "There is no thief. You are acting crazy." "Am I?" I backed up toward the window. "Because the safe says someone tried 3 wrong codes, and Grandpa says he didn't touch it. So who was it? Grant, was it the maid, or was it the person who has the extra key?" "You don't know what you are talking about," he snarled. "You are trying to ruin me." "I am trying to find a wallet," I yelled. I heard the sound of a vacuum cleaner stop in the hallway outside. The housekeeping staff was listening. "Good. Get out," Grant said, grabbing Frank's arm. "We are leaving." "Ow, Grant, you're hurting me," Frank cried out. That was the line. I stepped forward and shoved Grant. I didn't push him hard, just enough to break his grip on Frank. "Don't you touch him," I said. My voice was low now. Dangerous. "You want to go downstairs, fine. Let's go downstairs. Let's go to the parlor room. But if you grab him again, I will call the police right here, and I will show them the safe." Grant stared at me. He saw something in my face he hadn't seen since we were children. He saw the sister who used to take the blame for him, realizing she held the whip hand. "Fine," he spat. "Let's go." I pulled out my phone as we walked out. I typed a quick message to Elliot Marsh. Subject escalation. Message. "I have physical evidence of attempted access to the safe. Grant is hostile. We are moving to the parlor room. I need you to call the hotel legal department now and tell them to preserve all footage from the 8th floor. Do not let them wipe it." I hit send. We walked to the elevator in a suffocating silence. Grant stood in the corner, tapping his foot. He was calculating. He was trying to figure out how much I knew. He thought he could still spin this. He thought he could go down to the parlor room, charm Mom, bully Frank, and make me look like the hysterical sister. He didn't know about the slow-motion clip. He didn't know about the bank logs. He didn't know that I had turned the parlor room into a courtroom. The elevator doors opened on the lobby level. "The parlor room," I said. "This way." I led them down the corridor. The door to the parlor room was open. Inside, I saw Miller setting up a laptop connected to a portable projector screen. The room was set with a round table and chairs. It looked official. It looked serious. "What is this?" Diane asked as we entered. She was already seated, holding a glass of wine. "Why is there a screen?" "We are going to verify the timeline," I said, holding the chair for Frank. "So we can all relax." Grant stopped at the door. He looked at Miller. He looked at the screen. "We don't need this," Grant said. "This is ridiculous. I am going to the bar." "If you leave," I said, standing behind the chair, "then we watch the footage without you, and when the police arrive, I will tell them you fled the scene." Grant froze. He looked at the guests passing in the hallway. He looked at the trap I had laid. He walked in and slammed the door. "Get on with it," he said. "Sit down, Grant," I said. I looked at Miller. He gave me a small nod. The file was loaded. The clip was cued. "Mom, Grandpa," I said, taking my place at the head of the table. "Before we eat, we need to see the truth, not what we think happened, but what actually happened." I signaled Miller. "Play it," I said. The projector hummed to life, casting a bright, rectangular light onto the screen. The cold open was over. The investigation was done. Now, we were in the final act, and I was about to drop the guillotine. The parlor room was meant to be a private execution chamber for the truth, a quiet space where I could dismantle my brother's lie away from the prying eyes of the hotel guests. But my mother, Diane Whitaker, had never met a door she didn't want to open if there was an audience on the other side. Just as Miller was queuing up the projector, Diane stood up. She didn't look at the screen. She looked at the hallway, where the guests for the birthday dinner were beginning to congregate, confused by the empty banquet hall and the commotion near the elevators. "I cannot breathe in here," Diane announced, her hand fluttering to her throat. "It is too small. I need air." She threw the double doors open before I could stop her. The hallway was filled with friends of the family. People from the country club, business associates of Frank's, and the inevitable hangers-on who orbit anyone with a net worth over $10 million. They were holding champagne flutes, their faces masks of polite concern. "Oh, Diane," a woman in a silver sequined dress called out. It was Mrs. Van de Veer, the wife of a local judge. "We heard there was an incident. Is Frank all right?" This was the opening Diane had been waiting for. She didn't retreat into the room. She stepped out into the corridor, transforming the threshold into a stage. "It was terrible. Simply terrible," Diane said, her voice trembling with a practiced vibrato. "We were targeted, right in the lobby. You think you are safe in a place like the Hallowcrest, but these criminals, they target the elderly. They know who is vulnerable." I stood by the projector, watching the narrative escape my control like a virus. Diane wasn't just venting. She was cementing the story. By telling these people, these influential, gossiping people, that Frank was a victim, she was making it socially impossible for us to retract the accusation later. To walk it back would mean admitting she was a liar. Grant saw the opportunity instantly. He pushed past me, leaving the gloom of the parlor room to join our mother in the light of the hallway. He adjusted his cuffs, assuming the posture of the aggrieved protector. "We are handling it," Grant told a group of men who were looking at Frank with pity. "I wasn't going to let him get away with it." "You have to be vigilant. You know Grandpa is 80. He couldn't defend himself. I did what any grandson would do." "Good for you, Grant," a man said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Too many people just look the other way these days." "Exactly," Grant said, his voice gaining strength. "I told the security, I don't care about the money. It is the principle. You don't touch a Whitaker." I watched from the doorway, feeling a cold knot of nausea tighten in my stomach. It was brilliant, in a sick way. Grant was inoculating himself against the truth. He was building a wall of public opinion so high that even if I showed the footage, the guests would choose to believe the hero-grandson narrative because it felt better. It felt safer. I looked at Frank. He was still sitting at the table in the parlor room, staring at his hands. He heard the praise Grant was getting. I saw him straighten up a little. He liked being the victim if it meant Grant was the hero. It validated his dependency. I stepped into the hallway. I had to pop this bubble before it hardened into concrete. "Grant," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through the murmurs of sympathy. "We need to finish our verification. The guests can wait 5 minutes." "Violet, please," Diane snapped, turning on me with a look of pure venom masked as maternal exhaustion. "Don't be so bureaucratic. Your brother is shaking. He just fought off a criminal." "He didn't fight anyone, Mother," I said. "He screamed at an auditor." "An auditor?" Mrs. Vanderveer asked, blinking. "I thought it was a pickpocket." "It is a misunderstanding," Grant interjected quickly, stepping in front of me. "Violet is she is very corporate. She worries about liability. I worry about my family. I worry about the truth," I said. At that moment, the elevator doors down the hall slid open. Jordan Hale stepped out. He had not gone to his room to hide. He had not waited for a lawyer. He walked down the corridor with a terrifying calmness, holding the handwritten statement I had asked for in one hand and his phone in the other. He stopped at the edge of the crowd. The silence that fell over the hallway was absolute. To the guests, this was the villain returning to the scene of the crime. I saw men stiffen, ready to defend the ladies. I saw Diane gasp and clutch her pearls. "That's him," someone whispered. "That's the guy." Grant turned pale. He hadn't expected Jordan to show his face. He expected shame to do its work. "You have some nerve coming back here," Grant said, puffing his chest out. "Security, why is this man on the floor?" Jordan ignored Grant completely. He looked straight at me, then scanned the crowd of tuxedos and evening gowns. He didn't look intimidated. He looked like a man who was done playing games. "I am here because Ms. Jenkins asked for a statement," Jordan said, his voice clear and projecting well in the acoustic corridor. "And because I have a question for Mrs. Whitaker." Diane froze. "Me. You stay away from me. You told the police I was a random thief," Jordan said, holding up his phone. "But I just got off the phone with my firm, and they informed me that if I am arrested, they are legally obligated to disclose the nature of my visit to the Hallowcrest, which means the audit becomes public record." "Audit?" Grant laughed, but it sounded brittle. "Nobody cares about your taxes, pal." "I am not here for my taxes," Jordan said. "I am here to audit the baffling discrepancies in the disbursement of funds from the Whitaker Family Foundation, the charity that your grandfather chairs." The air was sucked out of the hallway. The Whitaker Family Foundation was the crown jewel of Frank's social standing. It was how he bought respect. It was how he bought his way onto boards. To suggest it was being audited was like suggesting the Pope was stealing from the collection plate. "That is a lie." Diane shrieked, "How dare you?" "I have the engagement letter right here," Jordan said, tapping the papers in his hand. "I was scheduled to meet Frank Whitaker at 4 o'clock to discuss 3 unauthorized withdrawals that were flagged by our compliance system. But I never made that meeting, did I? Because at 3:43, I was accused of stealing a wallet." The guests were exchanging looks now. The narrative was shifting. The random street crime was suddenly smelling like white-collar embezzlement. "He is lying," Grant shouted. He was sweating profusely now. "He is just trying to distract you. He stole the wallet, I saw him." "Then call the police," Jordan said. He took a step forward, offering his wrists. "Go ahead. Call the Cincinnati Police Department. Let them come. Let them search me. And then, let them search the financial records of the foundation. I am ready. Are you?" "No," Diane shouted. It was a reflex. "No police. This is a family matter. We don't need the authorities involved in a birthday party." The contradiction hung in the air. A moment ago, she was crying about criminals targeting the elderly. Now, she was refusing to call the cops on the criminal. Mrs. Vanderveer stepped back from Diane, a frown creasing her forehead. "Diane, if he stole from Frank, why wouldn't you want the police?" "Because it is embarrassing," Diane stammered. "Frank is confused. We don't want a scandal. The scandal is already here, Diane, a deep voice said from the back of the crowd. A tall, gray-haired man in a tuxedo stepped forward. He had been listening quietly near the wall. I recognized him immediately. It was Arthur Sterling, a retired investment banker and a current board member of the local children's hospital, one of the charities the Whitaker Foundation supported. Arthur walked up to Jordan and peered at him through his rimless glasses. "I know you," Arthur said. "You are Hale. You did the forensic sweep on the chaotic books of the Arts Council last year." "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," Jordan said, nodding politely. "I did. He is the best in the state," Arthur said, turning to look at Grant. "He found $400,000 that the treasurer had hidden in vendor kickbacks. If Jordan Hale says he is here for an audit, he is here for an audit." Grant looked like he had been punched in the gut. The hero narrative was dissolving. The guests were stepping away from him, physically creating a distance between themselves and the stench of impropriety. "He could still be a thief," Grant stammered, his voice weak. "Maybe he is broke. Maybe he needed quick cash." "Grant, stop," I said. I stepped into the center of the circle. Standing between my brother and the guests, I felt a strange sense of calm. The social pressure Grant had tried to use against Jordan had just backfired. The audience was now primed for the truth. "You are embarrassing yourself," Grant hissed at me. "You are siding with them. You always do this. You always turn against the family to make yourself look smart." "I am not against the family," I said. "I am trying to save it from a felony charge." I turned to the guests. "I apologize for the drama," I said, my voice steady. "But since we have an audience, and since my brother insists on his version of events, we are going to settle this right now, not with stories, not with accusations, with evidence." I gestured to the open door of the parlor room. "There is a projector screen in that room," I said, "and there is a security manager waiting with the raw footage of the lobby from 3:43 p.m. I am asking all of you to give us 10 minutes. We will watch the clip. If the camera shows Mr. Hale taking the wallet, I will personally drive him to the police station." I paused, looking directly at Grant. "But if the camera shows something else," I said, "then we are going to have a very different conversation. You can't do this." Diane grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You are going to humiliate your grandfather. Think of his legacy. His legacy is being destroyed right now." "Mom," I said, pulling my arm away. "By this lie, shame is bad, but false accusation is a crime, and covering up financial fraud is a bigger crime." "There is no fraud," Grant shouted. "It is just a lost wallet." "Then you have nothing to fear from the tape," I said. I looked at Arthur Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, would you join us?" "As a neutral party." "I would be interested to see it," Arthur said, his face grim. "No," Grant blocked the doorway. "This is private, I forbid it." "You don't own the hotel, Grant," I said, "and you don't own the truth." I walked past him. I didn't push him. I just walked with enough conviction that he instinctively moved out of the way. I entered the parlor room. Behind me, I heard the shuffle of feet. Arthur Sterling followed, then Mrs. Vandeveer, then Jordan Hale, and finally dragged along by the sheer gravitational pull of the crowd. Diane and Grant stumbled in. The room was dim, lit only by the blue square of the projector screen. Miller was standing at the laptop, looking uncomfortable as the tuxedo-clad crowd filed in. "Close the door, please," I said to Jordan. He shut the double doors. The lock clicked. The noise of the party outside was cut off. Inside, the silence was heavy and suffocating. It was the silence of a courtroom right before the verdict is read. I walked to the front of the room and stood next to the screen. "Grandpa," I said to Frank, who was still sitting at the table, looking small and bewildered, "I need you to look at the screen. I need you to see who really touched you." Frank looked up. He looked at Grant, who was standing in the back corner, his arms crossed, his face a mask of sullen terror. Grant didn't signal him this time. Grant couldn't save him. Just play it, Grant said from the shadows. Let's get this over with so I can explain why the angle is misleading. He was still trying. He was still convinced he could talk his way out of gravity. I looked at Miller. Play the clip, I said. Normal speed first, then the slow motion. The atmosphere in the parlor room was tightening like a noose. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, blocking out the last of the afternoon sun, leaving us bathed in the clinical blue glow of the projector screen. The guests who had crowded in, Arthur Sterling, Mrs. Vandeveer, and a handful of others, stood along the back wall, silent and uncomfortable. They were witnessing the autopsy of a family reputation, and they couldn't look away. Grant was standing near the door, vibrating with a frantic energy. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the laptop sitting on the small table where Miller, the security manager, was preparing the file. I saw Grant's eyes narrow. He made a move. It wasn't a run. It was a casual slide, a step toward the table that looked innocent enough if you didn't know he was desperate. He leaned in toward Miller, his hand reaching out as if to touch the keyboard. "You know, Miller," Grant said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper that I could still hear from 10 feet away. "We don't need to do this. This is hotel property. You don't have authorization to show this to non-employees. I can have your job for this." Miller's hand froze over the trackpad. He looked up, intimidation flickering in his eyes. Grant was a Whitaker, in this city. That name still carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "Grant, step away from the computer," I said. My voice was calm, but inside, my stomach was twisting. I moved to intercept him, placing my body between him and the machine. "I am just telling him the liability protocols," Grant sneered, backing up a half step but staying dangerously close. "You are exposing the hotel to a lawsuit. Violet." "Actually," a deep voice came from the open doorway behind us. "Ms. Jenkins is protecting the hotel from a spoliation of evidence charge, which, I assure you, is far more expensive." Grant spun around. Elliot Marsh stood in the doorway. My lawyer looked exactly like what you would want a shark to look like if it wore a 3-piece suit. He was holding a leather briefcase, and his expression was one of polite, lethal boredom. He stepped into the room, and the air pressure seemed to drop. "Who are you?" Grant demanded. "I am Elliot Marsh," he said, walking over to stand directly behind my right shoulder. "I am retained counsel for Ms. Jenkins, and as of 5 minutes ago, I am acting as temporary legal guardian for the interests of Mr. Frank Whitaker regarding his financial and personal security." "You can't represent my grandfather," Grant spat. "He didn't hire you." "No," Elliot said, smoothing his tie. "But Ms. Jenkins did, and given the allegations of elder abuse and financial coercion, I have advised the hotel management that any destruction of evidence will be treated as an obstruction of justice. So, Mr. Miller, please proceed." Grant looked at Elliot, then at me. He deflated. He knew who Elliot Marsh was. Everyone in Ohio corporate law knew who Elliot Marsh was. The physical threat Grant offered, the bullying, the size, the volume was useless against a man who billed $600 an hour to destroy people on paper. "Fine," Grant said, retreating to the corner of the room near Diane. "Show the damn movie. Show everyone how crazy my sister is." "Before we watch," I said, turning to the room, I needed to set the stage. The video was the bullet, but I needed to aim the gun first. We need to understand context. "Jordan." I nodded to Jordan Hale, who was standing near the screen. He looked tired, but his posture was upright. He held the sheaf of papers he had pulled from his bag, the audit that Grant had claimed was a lie. "Thank you, Ms. Jenkins," Jordan said. He turned to face Arthur Sterling and the other guests. "I want to be clear. I did not come here to ruin a birthday party. I came here because my firm identified a pattern of irregularities in the Whitaker Family Foundation accounts." "Lies," Diane hissed from her chair. She was gripping Frank's hand so hard his knuckles were white. "He is a stranger. He is making it up." "Mrs. Whitaker," Jordan said, his voice level. "In the last 6 months, there have been 5 withdrawals classified as consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in Delaware. The total amount is close to $80,000. The authorization signatures on these checks belong to Frank Whitaker. He held up a document. It was a photocopy of a check. However, Jordan continued, the signature timestamp contradicts Mr. Whitaker's location. 2 of these checks were signed digitally while Mr. Whitaker was hospitalized for his hip surgery. He didn't have access to his digital key. The room went deadly silent. Arthur Sterling adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. Who had the key? Arthur asked. That is what I was here to ask, Jordan said. But before I could meet Mr. Whitaker to verify his signature, I was accused of theft and detained. He is using you, Diane shouted, jumping to her feet. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Violet, can't you see? This man is a con artist. He is trying to shake us down, and you are letting him attack your brother. I am not attacking anyone, Mother, I said. I am looking for the truth. I turned to Frank. This was the hardest part. I had to break him to save him. He sat there, small and trembling, his eyes darting between Grant and the floor. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the shouting to start. Grandpa, I said softly. I knelt down so I was at eye level with him. I need you to answer me honestly. No one is going to be mad at you. Okay. Frank nodded, his lower lip quivering. In the lobby, I said, did you feel Jordan touch you? Did you actually feel a hand in your pocket? The room held its breath. Frank looked at me. His eyes were swimming with confusion. Then, slowly, inevitably, his gaze slid over my shoulder. He looked at Grant. Grant stared back. He didn't speak. He didn't nod. He just stared with a hard, intense pressure. It was a look that said, stick to the script. Don't humiliate me. Frank swallowed. He looked back at me. Yes, Frank whispered. I felt him. He bumped me. And he took it. My heart broke. He was lying. I knew he was lying. But he was so conditioned to protect Grant, so terrified of being the cause of a scene, that he would perjure himself in front of his friends. See? Grant shouted, throwing his hands up. He said it. The victim identified the attacker. What more do you want? He is confused, I said, standing up. He is looking at you for the answers. Grant, he is 80 years old. He isn't blind, Grant yelled. He knows when he's been robbed. At that exact moment, Miller's radio crackled. The static noise was loud in the quiet room. Miller pressed his earpiece, listening intently. His expression shifted from professional detachment to surprise. Say that again, Miller said into his lapel microphone. He listened for another 5 seconds. Then he looked up. He looked at me, then at Grant. Ms. Jenkins, Miller said, my team just finished a secondary sweep of the 8th floor. And, I asked. They found the wallet, Miller said. Grant let out a loud, triumphant laugh. Ha. See? They found it. I told you he ditched it. Where was it? In a planter under a rug. No, sir, Miller said. It was in room 819, in the desk drawer, buried under a stack of room service menus. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't tense. It was baffled. In the room, Mrs. Vanderveer whispered. But Frank said it was taken in the lobby. Grant's face went through a complex series of contortions. First shock, then calculation, then relief. He seized the lifeline. There you see, Grant grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. It wasn't a theft at all. Grandpa just forgot it. He is old. He gets confused. He left it in the room, came down, got bumped. Panic set in, and he thought it was gone. It is a mistake, a simple, harmless mistake. He turned to the guests, spreading his arms wide. I apologize. Everyone, Grant announced, his voice booming with false conviviality. False alarm. No crime here. Just a mix-up. Let's all go have dinner. Jordan, you can go. No hard feelings. It was a perfect pivot. He was throwing Frank under the bus, painting him as senile to save himself. He was willing to label his grandfather incompetent to avoid the fraud investigation. So we can go? Diane asked, standing up, looking hopeful. "Oh, thank God." "No," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped Diane in her tracks. I walked over to the screen. I stood directly in the light of the projector, my shadow casting a long silhouette against the blue background. "If the wallet was in the room," I said, looking at Grant, "then Grandpa didn't have it in the lobby, correct?" "Exactly," Grant said, smiling. "He imagined it." "Then why?" I asked. "Did he scream that he felt a hand?" "Phantom sensation," Grant waved his hand. "Old people get it." "And why?" I continued. "Did you scream that you saw the theft?" Grant blinked. "I thought I saw it, in the heat of the moment." "You thought you saw it," I repeated. "So, if we watch the video, we should see Jordan walking past, maybe bumping him, and nothing else. We should see no hands going into pockets, because the wallet was upstairs, right?" Grant's smile faltered. He realized the trap. If the wallet was upstairs, the pocket was empty. But if the video showed a hand going into the pocket, then someone was reaching in. And if that hand wasn't Jordan's— "We don't need to watch it," Grant said, his voice rising in pitch. "The wallet is found. The crime is null and void, Violet. Stop dragging this out." "The location of the wallet doesn't erase the action in the lobby," I said. "If someone reached into that pocket, they were looking for something, or they were planting something, or they were pretending to take something to stage a crime." I looked at Arthur Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, if an auditor is detained based on a false accusation that covers up financial irregularities, does the location of the wallet matter?" "No," Arthur said, his voice grim. "The intent matters. Show the tape." "Grant," I said, "you said you saw a thief. Let's see what you saw." "Don't," Grant lunged forward. I said no. Elliot Marsh stepped in front of him. He didn't touch Grant. He just stood there, a solid wall of legal consequence. "Mr. Whitaker," Elliot said. "Sit down." Grant froze. He looked at the door. He looked at the window. There was nowhere to go. I turned to Miller. "Play it," I commanded. "And Miller, get ready to pause it on my signal." The room went dark as Miller hit the spacebar. The blue screen flickered and resolved into the high-definition feed of the Hallowcrest lobby. The countdown was over. The explosion was beginning. The room went dark, save for the rectangle of light projected against the far wall. The hum of the projector fan was the only sound in the parlor room. A low mechanical drone that seemed to vibrate in my chest. I stood to the side of the screen, watching the faces of my family and the guests. They were not looking at me anymore. They were looking at the digital resurrection of the moment that had started this nightmare. "Miller," I said, my voice cutting through the gloom. "Play it at normal speed first." On the screen, the lobby of the Hallowcrest Hotel came to life. The timestamp read 3:43 in the afternoon. We saw the rush of the crowd. We saw the tourists with their suitcases clogging the path. We saw Jordan Hale walking toward the exit, his stride purposeful but unhurried. We saw him squeeze through the gap between the pillar and the concierge desk. We saw the contact. At full speed, it looked exactly as Grant had described it. A blur of motion, a shoulder bump, Frank's immediate reaction of slapping his pocket, Grant's synchronized scream. To the naked eye, it was a perfect tableau of a street crime. "There!" Grant shouted from the back of the room. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "You all saw it. He bumped him. He was right there. Why are we even doing this?" "Because," I said, not taking my eyes off the screen, "the human eye is easily tricked by speed. That is what magicians rely on, and that is what you relied on." I turned to Miller. "Rewind to 3:43 and 10 seconds, I commanded, "and play it at 25% speed, frame by frame if you have to." Miller tapped the keyboard. The video jumped back. The figures on the screen froze, then began to move with a ghostly underwater slowness. "Watch Jordan's hands," I told the room. The video crawled forward. Jordan Hale approached the bottleneck. As he navigated the space between the pillar and my grandfather, his body turned slightly to avoid a collision. We saw his left hand clutching the shopping bag. The knuckles were white from the grip. We saw his right hand. It was hanging by his side. As he brushed past Frank, his right hand swung slightly with his stride. But it was open. The fingers were splayed. The palm was facing his own thigh. At no point, not for a single frame, did his hand move toward Frank's jacket. He touched Frank's shoulder with his own upper arm, a purely incidental contact, and then he was past. "He didn't touch the pocket," Arthur Sterling whispered. He had moved closer to the screen, his glasses reflecting the blue light. "His hand is nowhere near it." "Now," I said, my voice hardening. "Watch the other side. Watch the space behind Grandpa." The room collectively shifted their gaze, in the slow-motion footage, while everyone was watching Jordan. Another figure was moving. It was Grant. He was standing directly behind Frank's right shoulder. As Jordan created the distraction, the bump, Grant made his move. It was precise. It was practiced. We saw Grant's right hand detach from his side. We saw the heavy gold signet ring on his pinky finger catch the lobby light. The hand dipped. It didn't reach out to steady Frank. It dove straight into the open patch pocket of the tweed blazer. "No," Diane gasped. It was a sound of pure denial, like she was watching a car crash she couldn't stop. On the screen, the hand emerged. It was holding a brown leather rectangle. Grant's hand moved with lightning speed. He pulled the wallet out, and in the same fluid motion, he passed it behind his own back to his left hand. Then, immediately, he brought his empty right hand up to Frank's shoulder and began to scream. "Freeze it," I ordered. Miller hit the spacebar. The image locked. It was high definition. It was undeniable. Grant Whitaker was standing behind his grandfather, his mouth open in a scream of accusation, but tucked behind his back, clearly visible in the gap between his arm and his torso, was the brown leather wallet. "That is the wallet," Miller said. His voice was professional, devoid of emotion. "Subject Grant Whitaker is in possession of the item at 3:43 and 14 seconds. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. I looked at Mrs. Vandeveer. She had her hand over her mouth. I looked at Arthur Sterling. He was looking at Grant with a mixture of disgust and pity. "It is a fake," Diane screamed. She jumped up, knocking her chair over. "That is a fake video. You doctored it, Violet. How could you? You edited this to frame your brother." "Mother, stop," I said. "It is AI," Diane yelled, looking around the room for support. "Everyone knows you can make videos do anything now. My son is not a thief. Grant, tell them it is fake." Grant was pressed against the back wall. He looked like a trapped animal. He was sweating so profusely that his shirt collar was dark. "It has to be a glitch," Grant stammered. "The angle. It's a shadow." I was holding my own wallet. "Your wallet is black, Mr. Whitaker," Miller said calmly. "The object in the video is brown, and we can see the monogram if I zoom in." "This is ridiculous," Grant shouted. "The wallet was found in the room. We just established that if I took it in the lobby, how did it get to the room?" "Because you put it there," I said. I walked over to the table where Miller sat. "Miller," I said, "please share the access log you pulled for me earlier regarding the secondary keycard for room 819. Miller looked at his notes. "A duplicate keycard for the suite was issued to Mr. Grant Whitaker at 1:15 p.m. The log shows that this specific keycard was used to access the room at 4:10 p.m. That is approximately 20 minutes after the incident in the lobby." I turned to Grant. "You took it," I said. "You caused the scene to detain Jordan, and while we were all arguing in the lobby, while I was keeping Jordan from leaving, you slipped away. You went up to the room, you planted the wallet in the desk drawer, and you came back down to play the hero." "Why?" Arthur Sterling asked. He turned to face Grant. "Why would you do that to your own grandfather? Why stage a theft?" Jordan Hale stepped forward. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "Because he needed time," Jordan said. "And he needed to discredit me." Jordan looked at Frank. "Mr. Whitaker," Jordan said gently, The audit I was conducting wasn't just about missing funds, it was about unauthorized changes to the beneficiary structure of your family trust. There were documents filed last week that attempted to grant power of attorney to your grandson. Jordan pointed at the paper. Those documents required 2 signatures, Jordan said. Yours and a witness. The witness signature on the filing is dated today, but you haven't signed anything today, have you, sir? Frank stared at Jordan. Then he looked at the screen, where the frozen image of Grant stealing from him was still glowing. No, Frank whispered. I haven't signed anything. Grant needed access to your safe, I said, connecting the final dots. He needed your physical security token to digitally notarize the forgery. He tried to get into the safe earlier, that is why it was locked out. He couldn't guess your new code. So he staged this. He created a crisis to confuse you, to isolate you, and to keep the auditor downstairs while he tried to find the code or the key in your wallet. I pulled the scrap of paper from my pocket, the torn corner of the bank envelope I had found in the trash. He was intercepting your mail, Grandpa, I said. He has been erasing the warnings the bank sent you. I looked at Grant. It wasn't about the $2,000 in the wallet. It was about the $40 million in the trust. Grant looked at Frank. He tried to smile, but his face was a rictus of terror. Grandpa, Grant said, his voice cracking, don't listen to them. Violet is jealous. She always has been. I was trying to simplify things for you. You know how hard the paperwork is. I was helping. Frank stood up. He used the table to brace himself. He looked at the screen one last time. Then he looked at the grandson he had championed for 30 years, the grandson he had protected, funded, and excused. You stole from me, Frank said. His voice wasn't loud, but it broke with a sorrow that was painful to hear. In front of everyone, you let me scream. You let me look like a fool. I did it for us, Grant pleaded. He turned to Diane. Mom, do something. Tell him. Diane stood there, her mouth opened. But for the first time in her life, no story came out. The image on the screen was too absolute. The guests were too quiet. The social armor she had spent a lifetime building had been pierced by a single frame of video. She looked at Grant, and then she looked away. She sat back down and covered her face with her hands. Grant was alone. Miller, I said, please turn off the projector. The room plunged back into semi-darkness. I have prepared a statement, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. Mr. Hale, on behalf of the Whitaker family, I formally retract the accusation of theft. We acknowledge that you are innocent of any wrongdoing. We apologize for the detention and the distress. I looked at Elliot Marsh. Elliot, I said, please initiate the protocol for immediate financial guardianship. We need to secure the accounts and the trust against any further unauthorized access, and I want a restraining order filed to prevent Grant from accessing Frank's property or person until the audit is complete. Consider it done, Elliot said. You can't do that, Grant screamed. I live in the guest house. You can't kick me out. You checked out of the family the minute you put your hand in that pocket, I said. I turned to the guests. Thank you for your patience, I said. Please, return to the dining room. Dinner will be served shortly. My grandfather needs a moment. Arthur Sterling nodded. He walked over to Jordan and shook his hand. I will walk you out, Mr. Hale, and if you need a character witness for any litigation, call me. The room emptied slowly. Grant slumped into a chair. Defeated. Diane was weeping silently, not for Frank, but for the image she had lost. I walked over to Frank. He was trembling. Come on, Grandpa, I said, offering him my arm. Let's go. I'm driving you back to Cleveland tonight. You aren't staying here. He looked at me. His eyes were red, but they were clear. Violet, he said. I'm sorry. It's okay, I said. We're going home. I looked back at Grant one last time. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just a man in a suit who had bet everything on a lie and lost. From today, I said to the room, Keeping the peace is no longer an excuse to trample on the truth. I opened the door and led my grandfather out into the cool night air. The jazz music from the lobby faded behind us. The drama was over. The reality had just begun. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a quiet room like the parlor? Or are you on a busy commute? Please let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share these moments of truth with even more people.